Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations. You've found us on the podcast. Have you found us at Primus Tracks on Instagram or Threads? Have you found Frankie on Facebook on a page titled Primus Tracks? Have you ever sent an email to primustrackspod@gmail.com? Chances are you'll receive a reply. I am Josh, the purveyor of Primus Tracks, and he is the man, the perpetrator of Primus Tracks Towers. Perpetrator? That makes you sound like a crook. No, you're a good man. It's Frankie Berestein.
Hey, Josh.
How's it going, Frankie?
I'm great, and you?
I am excited to be here today. As our astute listeners know, we are discussing track 5 from Les Claypool's Frog Brigade album, Purple Onion. It is simply titled Whamola. And those of you who have been around for a while know exactly what you're in for when you hear that word. Frankie, let's do some word association. When I hear Whamola, I just feel like I either have to get up and dance or bounce off some walls. When you hear the word Whamola, what comes to mind?
I immediately picture Les wearing his chimp mask.
Chimps. Whamolas and chimps. Absolutely. Yeah. As we often do, Frankie, there is miscellaneous debris to discuss today. Last time, Frankie, we talked about Long in the Tooth. I made an innocuous offhand comment that one Les Claypool, as a young man, probably would have heard Stompin' Tom Connors at his granddad's house at a young age. Although that would stand to reason, that is not entirely correct. And our good friend north of the border in Canada, Daryl, reminded me that there was an interview out there somewhere, and after a couple of small searches, I was able to find it with a quote from Les on how he actually discovered one Stompin' Tom Connors. Ready? Frankie's not ready.
I'm ready.
Oh, okay. Woo! I thought maybe you were girding yourself for this shocker of a story. Les says this. This is from an interview around 2014 or so, but he's referencing the year 2001. He says, there's a guy in Canada years ago when I was on tour with Oysterhead. We were in Vancouver and I was flipping channels and there was this guy from Canada. It was this old movie from the 70s, this guy in a cowboy hat playing a guitar and stomping on the ground, and he had a couple other players with him. He's singing all these songs about Canadian lore, and I was like, what's this all about? It was Stompin' Tom Connors, and he's huge in Canada. He's considered the Johnny Cash of Canada. I became a massive fan. In fact, on my new record, he is referring to Do It a Twang here, I do one of his songs. So I played these songs in the States, and nobody knows who he is. As I've been doing these shows, people are starting to find out who he is in my little corner of the demographic. It's a really cool thing to be able to turn people on to these guys. So Les actually discovered Stompin' Tom Connors in the year 2001, which is quite fitting because he must have really gone down the rabbit hole to have Stompin' Tom in his mind and leaking its way into his notebook for some lyrics for a release in 2002.
So what was the one that was part of Les's formative years would be Jerry Reed.
Jerry Reed certainly was part of his younger years, and I just lumped in Stompin' Tom Connors because they'd be fairly adjacent in the country singer-songwriter folk lexicon, I suppose. Although it does seem like Stompin' Tom didn't get too far out of Canada with his releases, but he is revered in Canada. I have to thank Daryl for reminding me of that interview, and so as a subset as a subset of miscellaneous debris, Frankie, if somebody writes in with a correction, a worthwhile correction for us, we must bestow upon them a title. And so, Daryl, you've earned this, buddy.
They call me Mr. Know-It-All.
Fabulous.
It's all yours. I make mistakes from time to time. Frankie is infallible. I say that partly in jest. If we ever get a detail wrong, if something seems off kilter and you've got some primary sources to correct us, please do write in.
Please don't insult us.
We're happy to be corrected, but you're right. Be kind about it. That's it's the way of the world.
I got some background on Whamola for you, Josh.
We should definitely talk about Whamola. So let's set that one up. This is track 5 on Purple Onion. It checks in at 5 minutes and 1 second. That 1 second, very important. We have Les Claypool on Steve Whamola and vocals as listed in your Purple Onion liner notes. Enor on guitar. Mike D on Cuica, I think. Let's make sure I got that correct.
Cuica.
You know what that sounds like, Frankie?
Nicolae Ceausescu.
Mike Dillon on the Cuica. Skerrick on the fancy sax, and the one and only Fish Fisher on drums.
Wow.
Frankie, Whamola. There's so much to talk about. Take it away.
I'll share with you a quote from Les. The Whamola is a piece of steel someone gave me. Claypool explained of the single-stringed pulley lever system that came mounted on metal. I hammer on it with sticks and it rumbles the bowels and genitalia. Some fans gave it to me years ago. They showed up in the middle of the night and dropped it off by the bus.
Ha!
Whamola was premiered on February 14th, 2001 in Boston, and it has been performed consistently ever since. Note that there are 2 different songs. Whamola, which is a standalone track and includes the I'm Gonna Do What Simon Says lyrics. And there's also Drum and Whamola Jam, which is played as part of an improvised jam and is always different. Both configurations have been played extensively by several Les Claypool projects and by Primus. So this would be the first instance where a Les Claypool solo song successfully leaks its way into the Primus live catalog. I mean, there had been teases all the time, but this would be the first time a full song was performed by Primus. So I told you both configurations have been played extensively. Yeah. Whamola, drum, and Whamola have been performed by Frog Brigade, Oysterhead, Bucket of Bernie Brains, Fancy Band, Fungi Band, Primus, and several one-off performances with other musicians, including Bastard Jazz, for instance. During Primus concerts, the Whamola portion of the set was performed as part of a nightly drum solo by Tim Alexander. Since 2010, Whamola per album version also started being performed by Primus with Jay Lane. Tim Alexander has also played Whamola with the Frog Brigade. During Bucket of Bernie Brains performances, the Whamola portion was done after a lengthy brain solo, following Elephant Ghost.
Nice.
Drum and Whamola Jam and Whamola are always an exciting, innovative, and musically creative show segment. Pro-shot Whamola performances can be viewed on Hallucinogenetics, 5 Gallons of Diesel, featuring performances from Frog Brigade at Bonnaroo 2010, and the 2015 webcast at the Orpheum Theater in Los Angeles, which we are going to sample tonight. Note that on June 15, 2004, Les was given the now legendary monkey mask by a member in the audience. As he recalls, Les paused "My Name is Moth" to collect the mask off the fan, saying, "Where are you going, monkey boy?" Subsequently wearing the mask for a "Here Come the Bastards" encore, making that night the first time he ever wore the mask on stage. Les asked the fan where he had gotten the mask because he had never seen anything like it, and he was amused by the fact that the fan wore the mask during food deliveries. This valuable anecdote was shared by the fan himself at the Bullboard. On a final note, on Geddy Lee's Big Book of Bass, Les mentioned during his interview with Geddy Lee that he was planning on manufacturing and selling Whamolas at some point in the future.
Ha! Interesting. A couple of things there. It does stand to reason that he would wear a monkey mask while pounding away on the Whamola, because it is quite primal in the way in which you make sound on that thing. And you can buy pre-made Whamolas from a bevy of sources, I believe, at this point, Frankie. You can go online and find Whamolas for sale from organized companies. But there is also a do-it-yourself guide out there. And I'm sure that this number has been affected by inflation, but there was a point at which you could make a Whamola for under $100. Pretty good.
But I'm guessing it must come down to pedals or whatever equipment and gear Les is using, because I've never heard a single Whamola on YouTube which sounds like his.
Right. The Whamola itself is going to sound fairly generic because as it's constructed, you have the one string, it's on that hinge with the wheel, so that when you apply pressure on that hinged arm at the top, it tightens it or loosens it depending on which direction you're going. And it also depends, of course, another variable is the pickup that you install on the Whamola itself, which is going to pick up the frequencies and send it through your electronics. So it does depend on a lot of different variables, maybe the gauge of string you're using, the pickup, but certainly everything in the chain beyond that, including pedals and effects. That's a great point that you make. And the Whamola itself is fairly simple in construction. It is that one string. And what I learned is that it's a portmanteau of whammy and viola. So that's where Whamola comes from.
Really?
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It also made me think, what if we've been saying it wrong all these years and it's actually Whamola? Oops. Whamola. I kind of like saying Whamola as opposed to Whamola. So
I forgot to mention as an update to the live history that, of course, during the Frog Brigade 2023 tour, Whamola made its triumphant return, and it was performed by Les with a brand new disco helmet.
Yes, the disco helmet. That was a highlight for me at that Frog 23 show I was able to attend. Very fun. And I believe it was a pretty common encore in Lot 1 and Lot 2.
It was pretty consistent, yes. And you know what has always struck me about Whamola? If in some parallel universe, for whatever reason, Les had not done all kinds of projects adjacent to Primus, I think Whamola is certainly something that would have come up in a Primus release one way or another, because the fact that it blended itself into the Primus live catalog tells you a couple of things. First of all, that Les truly enjoys performing on the instrument.
Yeah.
And secondly, that he feels it is something that he can inflict upon Primus because it's not out of place with the catalog. Do you agree?
As he said many times, there are many songs that he has created that he would not like to, using your terms, inflict upon Primus, which is a term he's used as well. And so Whamola must be the exception. That instrument and those jams, which is quite interesting. The other thing, as I was reading up on this instrument, Frankie, is that it kind of comes out of the washtub bass tradition, kind of those backwoods string band type applications. This is a more modern take on that instrument, and it just seems natural that he would be drawn to it, especially if some dudes just took it to the tour bus in the middle of the night, knocked on the door, and fled. And he picked it up like it was an orphan in a basket and decided to take it on and care for it. I'm sure that's not how it actually happened, but that's how I imagine it. And because it's so percussive, and he being a percussive player, I think he certainly would have gotten a kick out of it. And so it does seem natural to take it with him everywhere he goes on tour, no matter which band he's with. I did want to supplement your quotation with one from the book, the Primus Over the Electric Grapevine book by Greg Prato. Les had this to say: "These guys showed up at a show, I think it was Burlington." He is correct. "They gave me this thing. I dubbed it the Whamola. I just grabbed a drumstick and started hitting it. And then I plugged it in, and I hit a couple of pedals, and then all of a sudden, in brackets it says, sings the main riff to the song Whamola. We all started playing. When it came time to make the record, it was pretty much all there. It was just like, okay, everybody take a solo. And Fish Fisher had come up I had asked him to come up and record some stuff with me. He was just the perfect guy to play drums on it. And he removed his hi-hats and put in a couple of bells and an upside-down cymbal or something and started playing it as if it was a hi-hat. It was very spontaneous. And there it was, the Whamola song. It's gotten a lot of life. Now it's part of the South Park theme. You can't beat the Whamola. I don't play it enough. I played it way more in my other band than I do in Primus, and I should try and work it in a little more. It is kind of a solo instrument, but I should bust it out. People like it. There you go.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that the first appearance of the instrument Whamola in February of 2001 makes perfect sense because February 14th, 2001 in Boston is the first known performance of the Whamola because he had received it in Burlington 2 nights prior after that show. So immediately upon receiving that thing, he took it up on stage. And those of you who are hip to Toasterland can dial up that February 14th, 2001 performance from the Avalon Ballroom in Boston, and you will hear Les explain what he had just played.
So that thing I was just playing, I have no idea what it's called. A couple of guys in Burlington gave it to me a few nights ago, and you folks are actually the first people to see the damn thing. I quite like it myself.
There you go. That's the first utterance of the Whamola. The way Toaster has it tracked, this is what you first hear when you come upon the Whamola performance.
Does anybody have any weed?
You'll never guess who that is. That's right, Jay Lane. Now,
of course. As we are all aware, Primus made the opening theme song and credits song for South Park.
Yep.
But at some point during the history of the show, they modified the song, and the lyrics remain, so it's still less singing. But now the musical background is Whamola.
Yes. And he did mention that in the book, but it is, I don't know exactly what season of South Park when that change was made. I'm sure by now it's been quite some time.
Ages. Yeah.
Ages. But it was an interesting change. So Larry's iconic guitar riff remains as the intro, and then it transitions to Whamola with Les's vocals. It's a strange thing. I suppose it's more upbeat and a little more noisy and chaotic, so I guess it certainly matches the tone of the television show. So maybe that was the impetus for the change. More people know this tune than are aware of this tune, if you understand what I'm getting at, Frankie, because they've subconsciously absorbed it by watching South Park, and so they may not recognize Whamola for it being the song Whamola, but they might hear it and think, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And I should also mention possibly or probably my favorite Whamola performance of all time had to be at that South Park show where they modeled the different versions of the theme song, and Les did bring out the old Whamola for that.
That was really cool.
In the suit and the hat in which he's animated. All right, so let's talk studio version at this point. This one, as Les described, is a solo showcase. Essentially everyone in the Frog Brigade, as it stands, gets a solo. Skerrick, then Enor, then Mike D on the Kuika, and Les on the Whamola. But what I will say, Frankie, is Fish Fisher really carries this track for me. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Fishbone, get yourself familiar with Fishbone. Holy schlamola, they're fantastic. And Fish Fisher, as a drummer, of course, was a huge part of their energy and presentation and live dominance, I suppose. And he is a fantastic drummer, and it's so great that Les had him up to record some tracks for Purple Onion and had him out on Frog Brigade tour for a while because he brings a lot of energy and a lot of skill. He's a great drummer. Was it that he had to leave the Frog Brigade to drum for Justin Timberlake? One of those guys, right? Lefkowitz told us. I can't remember which one it was, but he went to drum for a Justin and made a lot of money doing so, I'm sure.
Something that has always struck me about the studio cut is that it's quite abrasive.
The studio cut is quite abrasive. Tell us more.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because Long in the Tooth was so atmospheric and laid back, and then you're kind of hit in the face with this song, or if it's the production, I don't know. There's something about it that it comes off as quite an abrasive, very harsh recording. I mean, it's enjoyable. It's really great, but it's a stark contrast to the rest of the record.
I would say so. It is the highest energy, in my opinion, highest energy track on the record. And I think it's just the nature of the excitement for recording the Whamola, but also wanting to give everybody a solo showcase or an opportunity to play something completely wacky over 16 bars and then go back to the refrain and then give somebody else a chance. Well, let's listen to some of that abrasiveness, because you're right. Long in the Tooth is a bit lower key, and then this hits you. Love that intro. Kind of sounds like an engine starting up, Frankie, and then when the Whamola comes in for the refrain, then we're in business. I wonder if you find this abrasive too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever pedals he's running it through or effects, that's what makes the sound from Les, of course, very unique in terms of what a Whamola sounds like. Now, you've listened to other people with their own homemade ones or commercially purchased ones, and they don't sound like that, huh?
Exactly. No, it's not the same.
I will say, when I first heard this record, Frankie, in 2002, this is the track that gripped me the most. I don't believe I had listened to any live recordings. He did produce the Whamola at the end of the set in which I saw them in the summer of 2001, Frankie. So that was my first exposure to the Whamola. And then hearing it again on the record, because I don't think I'd heard any of those other recordings, it was welcome, and it was high energy, and it certainly caught my attention because it was familiar. But also, I just thought it was great. It was left of center. It was bizarre. And I suppose I embraced the abrasiveness at that point, Frankie. So I really kept coming back to this track because I was 20, 21 years old. I had a lot of energy to burn, and this one was one of those tracks to get you that got you on your feet to bounce around and be a wild young person after hearing Long in the Tooth and going, I don't care about being old. I do want to sample some of the solos, of course, because that's kind of the point of the tune. I'm going to play Skerrick's solo in its entirety, and I'm going to ask you in a bit, Frankie. Skerrick's solo, probably my favorite of the four, just because of how atonal and wild it gets. Skerrick, blow us away. Too abrasive, Frankie?
No, it's fantastic. I also think Skerrick's solo is a highlight, for sure.
Yeah.
Atonal as it is, at the same time, is quite memorable.
Yeah, those screeches and honks and everything else. It resolves in the last couple of bars to something a bit more melodic. As we go through these solos, the other thing I appreciate is we're getting those scrapes and sweeps from Enor underneath. And, of course, the Whamola pattern changes to a cleaner lick as opposed to that distorted descending refrain. So we're getting that more sound, which, I don't know, just a content cow, I suppose, is what it sounds like underneath those. Mike on the Kuika is so fascinating because the Kuika is more or less a metal cylinder that you use some kind of cloth or the bottom of your t-shirt, I suppose, and you're rubbing it in a rhythmic way to create all kinds of sounds. For those of you who've seen Mike do that live, whether it's with the Frog Brigade or with his any of his other bands, it's always a treat because he hikes up his shirt, plays the Kuika, and people have no idea what's going on. and therefore I enjoy it. So let's hear Mike on the cuica, but also, Frankie, listen for those embellishments from Skerrick, Enor, and Les. Building. Really nice build there. And then the tension is relieved, of course, with the refrain. But all that building, that ascending, and the scraping that Enor's doing, it's a really cool build.
We get that refrain because we know that Les loves harking back to all of these old lullabies, songs, idioms, refrains, and whatever.
Speaking of, we're not going to talk about the lyrics very much, but this part, I remember the first time I heard this studio track, Frankie, I was startled when those vocals came back around. So here I am, enjoying the Whamola, and then all of a sudden I hear this. That scared me, Frankie. Are you familiar with Simon Says?
Yeah.
We're getting back to kid territory. Simon Says, of course, a game you play with kids. It's essentially an active listening exercise. But we had Little Miss Moffat. We've had Fuzzy Wuzzy Was a Bear. We had The Price is Right for sick kids at home like me, and now we have Simon Says. So we know that Les has young kids at home in 2002, and this is really coming through so far in just about every track on the record.
Which began with Oysterhead, by the way.
Sure, Little Faces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that started it. So 2001 into 2. So it's a common thread in these early aughts. It's really fun for me to come back to this studio cut because that refrain is certainly an earworm, and there's no doubt in my mind that hundreds of people who I didn't know on campus, as I'd be going from class to class or what have you, saw a guy, a pretty scruffy dude, walking around humming to himself as he made his way across campus. So I certainly had that in my head for quite some time. It's really fun to see it return on that Frog Brigade tour from last year. But it's kind of a novelty track, but I tend to really enjoy novelty tracks and just beat them into the ground, Frankie. Some people will hear some of these, a novelty track, some people will listen to them once and they get the joke or they get the conceit, they're satisfied. But I really enjoy them for whatever reason, and I will go to great lengths to continue listening to them. And I'm not sure why. I don't think I'm doing it to bug anybody. I don't think I'm doing it for any nefarious purpose, but I just really enjoy those kinds of tracks. How about yourself?
I'm not sure, according to my perception, what could constitute a novelty. If I enjoy something, then for me it becomes timeless. So it's kind of hard for me to identify something as a novelty.
By definition, it's something that is highly unusual and somewhat disposable, because once you're in on the joke, the joke's over. And so a lot of people would say that, something like a Weird Al Yankovic tune parody would be a novelty. However, I find that they have repeat listening value. There's another band called Beatallica, which the guys sound like Metallica and they play Beatles songs and they insert Metallica's instrumentation style and vocal style, some lyrics and that sort of thing. And there's plenty of people that will hear it once and say, I get it, and they're done with it. But
oh, yeah, I think I have an example of what could be a novelty for me. I once found out that Macaulay Culkin used to have a band which was called the Pizza Underground, and they would perform Velvet Underground songs, but they would replace all the words for things related to pizza.
Now, that's a novelty act.
That's a novelty for sure, right?
Well, I know what I'm doing tonight. For some listeners, I suppose Whamola has that quality of being a novelty. They hear it once or twice, they're done with it. And then there's some folks who can't get enough of it, and of course there's plenty of people who are somewhere in between. You know, it's interesting because the studio track, I couldn't get enough of it 20-odd years ago, Frankie. Mm-hmm. Live, well, it came back in 2023 as kind of the Frog Brigade Whamola, and so I was more than happy to see it again. But the drum and Whamola jam, I think for a lot of people, has run its course. Although, I should say I have not seen a drum and Whamola jam for some time, so I suppose I would welcome it. But for those of you hardcore fans who are going night after night after night, maybe that's your bathroom break. I don't know, Frankie, if you were following Primus around, or the Frog Brigade, or Do It to Twang, CLD, or the Frog Brigade, or Sausage, or what, it doesn't matter, and you were hearing drum and Whamola jam 17 nights in a row, how are you going to feel?
I would not miss a single second of anything going on stage.
Ah, so that explains the catheter and the waist bag that you always take with you to shows, because you're not leaving the rail for anything.
Exactly.
Nice. All that said, Frankie, you know what it's time for. Ah, yeah. That is the theme for Primates Takes. If you want your take on the track up for discussion, read right here on the podcast, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Primus Tracks. And one thing you'll see is a whole lot of threads that start with the term Primates Takes, because I want to know what you guys think about the track up for discussion. Today, of course, we are discussing Whamola, and here is what some of our primatrons, that is, have to say. Eric in Australia starts us off with a brilliant track on record, but perhaps wears thin in the live realm unless tastefully done. I'm hearing tastefully done a lot lately as we talk about the envelope filter and the Whamola. Frankie, that's fantastic. Our next entry is from Whamola 17, who may be biased, Frankie. We'll see. He says one of the coolest, most unique songs, instruments, and artistic creations ever. And we still don't know who it's by. Somebody made it. We just don't know who. And the inspiration behind my screen name, and basically username for everything. This song will always be special to me, including the live jams. Makes this one of my top 5 things Claypool has ever had a hand in. Hyperbolic much? All-time epic from our pal Whamola 17.
No
and
wonder.
then he added, Frankie, watching a man in a monkey mask drag that thing out, prop it up, and just start banging on it is so memorable.
Yeah. And also the cool thing is that when Les puts on that mask and he performs Whamola, when he decides he's done, he just tosses it to the ground and he leaves the stage swinging his arms. It's hilarious to watch.
It is. He goes full primate. When he enters the stage with it and the drumstick, and then when he's done with it, knocks it over. Do appreciate the theatrical element that he brings to the Whamola. And we've talked about it with the upright as well, when he comes out with the pig mask and he's swinging the bow around and doing some faux fencing with it and that sort of thing. He's having a lot of fun. Jordan Kahn, our resident fish expert, says, this showstopper transports me back 20-odd years. I was blown away when I first saw it on the Snow Core Icicle Ball in New York City. Best one I saw was with Trey shredding at Mountain Air 2002. It was oyster-rific. And I don't know
I love that term.
Oyster-rific? You're going to start using that now? Yeah.
Oyster-rific.
I don't know if we talked about that at length. We must have mentioned that Trey would bring out the Matterhorn, Les would have the Whamola, and they'd...
We did mention it, yeah.
Good.
They did go into that dynamic at the live shows, yeah.
Excellent. Johnny Perona, the composer of the Primates Takes theme, by the way, says, I fully expected this song's magic to dissipate over the years, but it absolutely has not. It's always a treat to get this one live. The dirty decrescendo riff gets me every time. I can't help but think of a Painted Herb starting off this tune at Bonnaroo 2002. Wait.
Oh, Painted Herb is legendary.
Oh, it was so exciting to see her back in the fold of a Les project. Gave me hope for the eventual Primus reunion that was a little over a year out. Tom Dastic says, super fun track that's even better live. A true jam vehicle. But we need a little sound cue for every time somebody says jam vehicle too. So somebody needs to sample a car engine or something. Or maybe I'll just play that little bit from Jerry. Brooks Delight says, the hits just keep coming. I love this track. In addition to a killer solo, Enor adds wonderful accents throughout. Skerrick's fancy sax solo, fancier than extra fancy ketchup. Fish from Fishbone killing it on the kit. Then years later, it ends up on South Park. Amazing. It's a top 3 Purple Onion track for me.
Thanks, Brooks.
Once again, Brooks breaks it down.
He totally did.
I really hope he starts that YouTube channel and siphons away our listeners. All 10 of them. Kevin says, I like the shiny new helmet Les started wearing for this. Thanks, Kevin. Kevin also said, I like turtles. Anthony Del Preet wraps it up with this. In contrast to Johnny, I would say that the magic of this song has waned a bit for me over time. After the initial awe over the Whamola instrument itself and how Les used it, the repetition of the riff didn't get my juices flowing as much. I do love all the instrumentation around the main Whamola line, especially Mike D's squeaky jungle toy.
Perfectly understandable.
Thank you all for your thoughtful takes. Oh, God.
Are we ready for the live cuts, Josh?
We are. We still don't have that second jingle yet, so I'm delaying playing a live cuts jingle because I want both of them on full display.
Sure.
By the way, this one's 12 minutes, Frankie. Are you serious? Are you serious, Frankie? Our first live cut, courtesy of Frankie Berestein, is a drum and Whamola jam from Boston. We're back to Boston, the origin of the live Whamola. 5 years later, we're at the Roxy 2006. Let's hear a portion of a 12-minute drum and Whamola jam. Question: who's the drummer?
I just want to mention, it's Paulo Baldi.
Thank you.
But I want to mention that at the beginning, that almost sounded like a precursor to Mushroom Men.
Oh, interesting. Well, as we know, mushroom the mushroom material, Les had composed well ahead of Fungi and Foe.
Yeah.
For the video game, so maybe there is something to that there. All right, so we just heard Drum and Whamola with Paulo Baldi. Now let's hear Drum and Whamola jam with Jay Lane on the Guinea Pig Tour. Here we go. What I appreciate is the two of them are recreating the studio track at a Primus show.
Correct.
In the words of Spock, fascinating. And next we're going to Milwaukee 2004. I imagine this is Tim Alexander.
Yes. And this is a sample of one of those epic drum solos that they would do nightly.
You are right about a sample because this one also almost 12 minutes. Really, Frankie? Really?
Those are those Fromage and hallucinogenic drum solos are sonic works of art.
There's the effects. All right, that one's compelling, Frankie.
I can't believe we got Herf to spill the beans on those effects all these years later.
Was it some kind of state secret? Oops. Sorry, Tim. Hopefully you're not on a hit list or anything. Paulo, Jay, Tim. Now we're going to Vegas 2004.
I think this is Bernie Brains.
Okay, so now we get to hear drums in Whamola with Brain.
Yeah.
Well, you sure picked quite the variety of drummers, and I do appreciate that, Frankie. That's what I appreciate about you, Frankie. He's really making Brain listen closely. Poor Brain. Let's go to the Fillmore 2002.
Fillmore 2002. Could it be Jay Lane? Paula Baldi. That's crazy.
Oh, this is New Year's Eve.
Yeah, Paula Baldi.
Yep. Ooh, I like that.
Notice how that wasn't a Whamola jam. That was actually Whamola.
We're on to the Orpheum. September 19th.
This has got to be one of my favorite Whamola performances out there, simply because of the very compact but very precise and well-executed drum solo that precedes it. And then it's just a hoot to watch the pro-shot footage and look at Les wearing the mask.
Primus, 9/19/2015, Orpheum Theater, Los Angeles. You search for that, you're going to get yourself high-quality pro-shot footage of a man in a monkey mask beating on a string. This is at the 48-minute mark. drumstick like a bow there. You're right, the monkey mask certainly enhances it, especially with the facial expressions.
Totally.
And the lower jaw he's making.
Has it been enough Whamola for a lifetime?
I might be whammed out. I might be satisfied for quite some
Whamola
time.
overload, yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's watching the video though reminds me of how awkward that instrument can be because his left arm is way out at shoulder height, essentially, controlling that arm to loosen or tighten the string. And he's also slamming away with his other hand, and then he's moving it all around. So it is quite a theatrical performance, especially in this video that you provided, Frankie. It's very much as if you gave a new toy to a child, and they just tried every single thing they could with it, every conceivable angle, every conceivable use. And that's what Les is doing with the Whamola. He just seems like he's got endless curiosity of the possibilities with the rhythms, using the stick, using the handle, and then the effects that he can layer upon it as well. So it truly is a fun toy for the guy. Now, he didn't invent it, but he certainly popularized it to a degree. And I think most people who know of the instrument probably know it because of him.
He made it his own, yeah.
Certainly did. And by the way, there are some really trash websites out there that claim he invented it.
Yeah, trash.
They're wrong. Anyhow, I can say this. Whamola, Simon says, be tracked. Next time, Frankie, is it ding dang or ding dong?
Oh my god, that's gonna be quite a conversation.
Either way, it's a doozy. Primates, thank you all so much for listening. Maybe you're Whamola'd out. Let us know. Later days.
Willie Mays.